I'm a little confused about something. What are all these students doing here? College students. There must be 1,000 of them. Who are you? Are you young Republicans? No. Are you Democrats? No. Then what are you? Students for Liberty. Liberty. What does that mean? Well, that's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
Thank you, and welcome to a special edition of the Stossel Show. For this show, we've come to the most horrible place in America, Washington, D.C. And we're here because these students are here, and this group excites me. They are different from how I was in college. They're from all over the country, and they come here to learn about liberty and good government. And I have to say, why do you care? You're in college. When I was in college, I cared about sports and girls. And public affairs was not on the card. But we're going to hear from you in a minute and learn about that. I mean, you're studying economists like Friedrich Hayek. I would have never had a clue, but you did. But before we hear from the students, I want to introduce you to someone who's taught me a great deal about liberty. David Boaz of the Cato Institute, think tank here in D.C., with the motto, they're dedicated to the dignity of the individual. Why that? What's that mean?
Because that's the most important thing in political life, in the relationship of the individual to the state. Every individual has the right and the responsibility to be treated with dignity and respect and to make the important decisions about his or her own life.
And I think most Americans would say, what are you talking about? The most important thing isn't the individual. That's selfish. The most important thing is that government keep us safe and take care of us and help the weak and the poor.
I don't think most people in America do think the government is more important than the individual. Maybe in some parts of the world. I don't think they do in America. Now, most people in America want a bigger government than I do. They think that individuals need more help than I think they need, and they think that their own ideas ought to be imposed on people through force. And I don't agree with that, and so those are the things we debate.
And what are, in the eyes of the Cato Institute, the big issues threatening the country today?
Well, certainly the fact that we're in two wars that have gone on forever, that's a big problem. I'm concerned about sort of a growing trend toward a police state in America that, you know, somebody wrote a book recently called 3 Felonies a Day. They said there are so many federal laws and federal regulations, you may be breaking the law every day. And then there's the looming bankruptcy crisis. We're already seeing it in Greece, we're seeing it in Europe, and it's coming here that we simply can't afford all the promises the government has made.
And I am going to do a show with this 3 felonies a day guy. He'd say I probably commit maybe 6 because I'm on television, I have an active life. But most Americans say we want government to protect us. We need more regulation. We need government to fix more problems.
Well, in fact, if you ask people if we need more regulation, most Americans say we don't. Now,
but
if you ask them about...
people are on the phone in their cars and they're dying...
Well, if you ask about specific regulations, sometimes people do think we need that. And part of that, then, is that's what think tanks do. We study the effects of regulations.
And if you were king at the Cato Institute, what laws would you repeal?
Well, if I were king, first I would repeal the law that made me king, because country...
And here in Washington, D.C., we should thank George Washington because they offered to make him a king, and he said no. I think his successors would have said yes.
Well, that's right. So I would start by repealing the laws that give one man that kind of authority. But certainly, let's start by making taxes lower, flatter, and simpler on the way to getting rid of the federal income tax. Let's get rid of the Department of Education. Let's transition away from a government-mandated retirement plan to a system where people save for their own retirement and end up with a lot more money at age 65 than they do under Social Security. Those are some laws we could repeal.
All right, let's hear from you.
My name's Clint Townsend. I'm from the University of North Texas. Woo! So I'm wondering if there's any historical examples you could point to where social safety nets have been provided in a private setting.
Sure. There have been books published about the way those systems used to work in both the United States and Great Britain. That there were clubs, there were associations, there were religiously based groups, there were ethnically based groups. The Polish in one neighborhood would have a group, the Jews in another neighborhood would have their group, where they would all put money into a common pool for their friends, relations, club members. And one of the things that happened was when the welfare state came along in both England and the United States, it kind of made these systems redundant. People said, well, I guess we don't need the private system. And now people say, what would we have if it weren't for the welfare state? And the answer is, well, you would have had these systems that the welfare state destroyed.
And before the welfare state was created, the poverty was declining quite sharply. After the war on poverty began and welfare, it continued to drop and then stopped. Progress stopped thanks to these programs, and now we say, well, I don't need to help the poor because there's this $30 billion welfare system taking care of it. What can I do?
We have come a very long way, but there still is race, gender, and economic status inequality. So how can we as libertarians address this issue, aside from the answer, the market will take care of it?
A lot of what we need to say is what you said at the very beginning. We've come a long way. Because sometimes we forget that we are a country of more than 300 million people, the most diverse country probably in the history of the world. And we need to make the point, one of the things that creates a racial gap in America is terrible schools in the inner city. And who provides those schools? The government. What kept black people down in America for many years? First slavery, then Jim Crow. Big government programs. When we got rid of them, there was a lot more equality, a lot more mobility, and so on. What kept women down? Laws that restricted them from certain occupations and so on. What kept gay people out? Sodomy laws and other laws that discriminated against them. So what we want is, in fact, a free society and a free market, which is not a panacea. It will not be perfect, but it's better than the alternatives.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I've heard a lot about smaller government in terms of dollars. Less spending, less regulation, but I haven't heard a lot of talk about a lot of concepts that we libertarians care about that don't have dollar values, like the rule of law and equal rights and peace.
You're right. A lot of times it does sound like when we say smaller government, we just mean one that taxes and spends less. What I like to talk about is I want to reduce the size, scope, and power of government over individuals. And so absolutely sending people off to war, spending our money, costing people's lives, that's big government. And inequality in marriage law, that's big government that conservatives often support. So there are a lot of areas, that's right, where small government should mean a government that has less intrusiveness into your life.
Welcome back to the Students for Liberty Conference. I'm joined again by David Boaz of the Cato Institute. This is the whole section for questions or comments, so come on up to the microphone. We'll continue the discussion.
Gabrielle Shiner from Queen Mary University of London. When you present these ideas, initially a lot of people say they're too selfish or too individualistic, but this weekend I've met people from almost every continent. So I'm wondering what you think it is about these ideas that are bringing together people from all over the world.
People everywhere just want to be free. And I know what we often find is that people don't necessarily want other people to be free. I find very few people who say to me, I don't know how to choose a good school for my child, so I'm glad the government does it for me. I find very few people who say to me, if the government would allow us only one brand of computer, then I wouldn't have to make up my mind which one to buy. I hear very few people who say, I wish we could go back to the days when there was just one phone company and one kind of telephone. So people generally want freedom and choice in their own lives, but somehow they don't think other people know how to choose who to marry, know how to choose what to smoke, know how to choose what to read or where to send their kid to school or how to save for retirement. But the fact is that all over the world, in 1989 in the Soviet Empire, in 2011 in the Arab world, people want to be free, and when they get a chance to try to demand it, they do.
My name is Alex Biles. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Michigan. And it's not too long since Occupy Wall Street was in the news. Regardless of our opinion of the movement, the facts do show a concentration of wealth moving towards the 1% of the population and in the U.S. Should libertarians be concerned about income inequality, and what's your solution?
Well, interestingly enough, if you look at graphs that go far enough back, it's clear that the concentration of wealth was greater in like the 1920s than it is today. So it has not been a steady increase. It was more concentrated then. There was a decline in concentration. More recently, there has been some increase in concentration. Should we worry about it? I'm not sure. One thing I notice is that on any given day that the price of Microsoft stock goes up, inequality increases. Because Bill Gates gets richer, and the rest of us, even if we own Microsoft stock, we only get a little bit richer. So am I worried about that day? No, I have a little bitty bit of Microsoft stock, so I got a little better off that day, but still inequality increased. Does that bother me? No, not really. However, when we have a system where the entirety of big business is considered too big to fail, so that if an automobile company or a bank or an insurance company is threatened with failure, the government bails them out. But if your father's car dealership or your shoe shine stand is threatened with failure, nobody bails you out. That's a bad system, and that absolutely is increasing inequality and increasing resentment for good reason.
And if you, I would just add to that, if we believe in freedom, freedom will lead to inequality. I'm only bothered by it because so many people are so upset by it, and they're using it as an excuse to clamp down on the capitalism that's made us prosperous and that helps poor people. And it's in their guts. It just feels unfair, but life isn't fair. Some of you are really good looking, and some of you are not. And you who are good looking will have advantages in life. That's not fair, but it's not a role for government to fix that. Just to have even rules.